Welcome to Perspective with Derwin L. Webb. I am Derwin L. Webb. We are downtown at the Fraser History Museum with another episode of Perspectives. We are here today to talk to someone that is very important to Kentucky. If you don't know her, you should know her. We are welcoming today Miss Keturah Herron, State Representative of Kentucky. Miss Herron, welcome to our show.
Thank you all for having me. It is a pleasure to be in this beautiful space and to be with some individuals that I've known for a very long time and have looked up to myself, so thank you.
I tell you this, we've had several different individuals on our show, but my producer kept saying, we need to have Keturah on. We need to have Keturah on. I'm very happy that you allowed your time to be able to be here today and talk about a few issues that are important to you and to Kentucky. So just want to start off. I know where you're from. I know your background. Why don't you give us a little background about who you are and what you're doing today?
Yeah, so I, for folks who don't know, I actually am from Richmond, Kentucky. I was born and raised in Richmond, Kentucky. I like to tell people that I live in the city now, but the country will never leave me. I consider myself a Kentucky girl. And then also, I believe that when you look at who and what a Kentuckian is, like who a Kentuckian is, I feel like that I embody all of that. And so I grew up in Richmond, single family mother. I've got two older siblings, and so I am the baby of the family. So sometimes that comes out in things, but
nothing wrong with that. I'm the baby also.
Yeah. And so I actually ended up moving to Louisville when I was 19. I transferred to the University of Louisville, and a lot of folks don't know this, but I actually walked onto the U of L women's soccer team, and got involved in athletics. At the University of Louisville, ended up tearing my ACL, so didn't have a long career in that. But pretty much, my work and who I am has been community. I think from how I grew up in Richmond, we had a large family. My mother has 9 brothers and sisters, and so that sense of community and family has always been instilled. And so I have taken those values that I grew up at home and brought those here with me to Louisville. I left Kentucky for a little bit, for a few years. And I came back here in 2016, started getting involved in the community work, mainly in juvenile justice work. And now the people said, you should run for office, and here I am as a state representative.
Well, let me go back to the University of Louisville, because you talked about your time there, and I know that you majored in sports administration. Did you have any idea when you were majoring in sports administration that it would get to this point?
No, not at all. I honestly thought that I was going to be this person that was doing a sports marketing. I was wanting to work for either the University of Louisville or pro team, and I would be smoozing and whining and dining people and in the box seats and watching the games, and that's what it was. Sports was my passion. I actually started to do some volunteer work with youth in sports. Started doing some work at Maryhurst, and eventually took a job at Maryhurst, taking my sports background, doing that work with them, and ended up falling in love and having a passion working with kids who were involved in our social service.
Well, talk about your early time being a community activist, more so. You talked about being at Maryhurst, talked about your time there. What made you have the sense of wanting to volunteer and doing something that's a little bit bigger than yourself?
I mean, the biggest thing is that we grew up in a single family home, and if you were to ask my mother today, she talks about how proud she is because she didn't know if she was going to get a call that I was going to be locked up or what I was doing, right? And so growing up, my mother worked 2 and 3 jobs, and my father wasn't present. And so I understood what that meant to not have a parent present. And so I felt like that I had this deeper understanding for our kids, who are our most vulnerable population. And so I just fell in love with connecting with youth that looked like me, that went through some of the same things that I did as a young person. And so when I came back to Louisville in 2016, my sister was like, you need to be in this meeting, you need to go to this meeting, you need to go talk to this person. And that's really how I got back and deep into the community here in Louisville.
Okay, talk about your time with ACLU.
Yeah, so at ACLU, it's interesting And a lot of people don't know this, but before 2018, I heard of ACLU before, but I had no idea like what they were, what they did. And so I was at an event talking about the impact of parental incarceration on youth and families. And at that point, they said, we need to talk to you. You should come do some volunteer work with us. And at ACLU, I became a lobbyist and a policy strategist, focused mainly on youth-related issues. And then in 2020, when Breonna was murdered, the only thing that I knew to do at that point was to change policy. I literally, on a call one day, said, I'm going to ban no-knock warrants. I had no idea what that meant, what that looked like. But it just rolled off my tongue. And from that point and moment, I took the skills and the things that I had learned prior to the last 2 years being in the halls of Frankfurt, talking to elected officials, building relationships with folks on the Republican side and the Democratic side. I took all of that knowledge and those contacts and just started working to get Breonna's law passed. But I definitely think that the work that I was doing at ACLU prepared me for this moment, even though I had no idea that this is the moment that I was going to be in.
Okay, let's talk about the moment at that time. The moment was the Breonna Taylor murders.
Yes.
How did that change you?
It changed me completely. I mean, I think that it made me, I already knew that this world was bigger and deeper than me, but it made me look at it on a granular scale of that there's things that are happening in our community and we can talk about it all day, but we need leaders and we need people to make movement. And for me, it made me get into action in a different way. I was always a person who would prefer to be behind the scenes. I didn't care if people knew who I was. I still don't care if people know who I am, but people know who I am. But I was a person that I just preferred to get the work done. And I realized that with the murder of Breonna Taylor, it was like, okay, I'm able to connect with the law enforcement, with elected officials, with people in the community, with people who have been identified as shooters, people who have had families who have been impacted by violence. Like, I've got an ability to connect with so many different people. And I really realized that is what the gift that God gave me and that I had a role to play. And so it really shifted who I was as a leader, but also internally, it made me look at who am I as an individual and what are things that I need to do in my own personal life, as we know life is so short. And so honestly, still to this day, I am in like a deep discovery of what 2020 has taught me and what that means moving forward.
Okay, you're a state representative.
State representative.
So what is it like? Because I'll be honest with you, I'm in awe of you because someone talked to me earlier today. I told them that you were coming on the show. And they said, man, ask her this question. I was like, what question? He said, ask her, what is it like to be in the House, almost like you're playing for the Washington Generals against the Harlem Globetrotters?
Yeah.
How do you even think about winning? So what is life like for you as a state rep?
I mean, I will say this at first. It has been a huge honor and blessing to be able to serve, but the shit is not easy. And I will say that, it takes a deep toll. And as you said, we are in the super duper minority. So for folks who don't know, we have 100 House members. Currently, there's 20 Democrats and there's 80 Republicans. And so you just take those numbers and then you take on top of the cultural wars and the things that people talk about, you add that on top of it. Then you add on the expectations of what the community says that you need to be doing or wants you to be doing. It's a lot. It's a lot. And, some days are better than others. Today has been a great day for me. I woke up and was able to participate in a press conference with the Blaine Hudson Middle School that opened. I left that, went to a committee meeting in Frankfurt, left that committee meeting, went to a Juvenile Justice Advisory Committee meeting here, and now I'm here on the radio show. But I've had a good day. I've had good conversations, good work, but it's also, sometimes it's a lot of pressure, right? Because we know what's happening. Like, I know what's happening in the community.
Right.
I know what changes need to be made. And sometimes it's frustrating knowing that we don't have those numbers to change policy, and going and talking to people who think that they know your district and your community better.
Right.
That is frustrating, but I know at this given point in time, like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And, you take the good and bad with any type of career.
Well, let me ask you this. Based upon the situation and circumstances, I've heard people say that success can be defined in many different ways. What would you consider a success based upon those circumstances that you have to deal with every day?
I mean, I think sometimes it depends on the issue. One thing that I have noticed is that they're not passing my policy, but they're using my language. Mm-hmm. And so last week there was a committee hearing in health and welfare, and they were talking about gun violence as a public health issue. They were not using those two terms last year. And so the fact that is the language and the message that is being held right now, to me, that's a success. Obviously, long term is what is the policies that we're going to get done? How do I move money in the budget? But the fact that I'm saying things and they're taking that and they're listening and they're hearing, that's success. And of course, that's long term success as far as actually getting bills done. Another thing this past session, I filed a bill to put money into the community. So to put more money for juvenile justice in prevention, intervention, reentry, and for evening reporting centers. The policy didn't pass, but guess what? We got those evening reporting centers. We've got community people here, folks who have been directly impacted by the system, regular community people who care about our kids, who now are getting funding to work with these kids. That's success. And it's not really something that the media talks about, but we know it's happening. And so for me, those things are successes.
Well, I know that your background is with working with kids, and you have a heart and a passion for kids. Our juvenile justice system is challenging. I'll say that without saying too many different things. Some of the things that you're working on right now are addressing some of those issues. Where do you think we are as far as the state is with our juvenile justice system, and what do you think needs to be done to make the situation a little bit better? I
mean, I think the biggest thing that we have to know and understand is for context. We've had, I believe it's 8 different commissioners in the last 11 years. If you've had 8, we talked about sports earlier. If you have 8 different coaches or 8 different general managers in 11 years, we know what the franchise is going to look like.
Yeah, well, you're right.
Right? And so when we talk about the juvenile justice system, it's broken. And, I'm not going to shy away from that. And I think that historically, we have done a disservice to the youth who are impacted. We've done a disservice to community members, to family members, and then those folks who have fallen victim to youth crime or youth behaviors. And so, right now, I would say we're failing. But I will also say that especially here in the city of Louisville, I just left a meeting. We have a great group of people who really care about finding solutions to change our system. And I think what people have to know and understand is that right now in the media, we hear the murders and we hear about the carjackings. Those things are real. That is a real issue. But for me, it's like that population is so small. Is a population of the kids who are committing the violent crimes or stealing cars. That's actually a small piece of the population. And so for me is, how do we make sure that we focus on these kids before they even get to that level?
Right.
And so that's what I want to do, is really focus on that intervention and prevention. And really what we have to understand and realize is that if you're talking about a 15-year-old, someone who's 15 today, think about what they were doing 3 years ago in COVID. Those were like some prime years, that middle school age. They were in the house. They were seeing and witnessing what was happening with Breonna Taylor. They spent, I was talking to my nephew yesterday about school. He spent his his 7th grade year on a computer, right? So that's a prime age for that socialization. And so for me, I believe that what we have to do is we have to move upstream, and we have to really look at that prevention, intervention, and then also make sure that our kids are healing from the things that's happened. If last year we had, I think it was 68 young people under the age of 18 who were murdered. Those 68 kids were in somebody's school at some point. They were living in a neighborhood. They have cousins. They have siblings. And so my thing is those 68 kids, we have lost them. But what about those thousands of other kids who are connected to those kids? Mm-hmm. How are we making sure that they're getting the things that they need as far as that trauma in which they dealt with of losing a loved one? You know, I didn't lose my first person until I was 19 years old. Somebody I went to high school with, I was 19. So I can't even imagine being 12 or 13 and losing a peer and then have to go back to school the next day and sit in the classroom or what have you. And so for me, it's a matter of going upstream, looking at prevention and intervention, and then talk about healing. We talk a lot about the trauma, but we have to talk about what it means to heal. And so those are some of the things that I feel like that we need to be focusing on.
Okay, I'm going to make you the head of DJJ. What's the first thing you do?
If I'm the head of DJJ, that's a big question.
Because I know it's a lot.
It's a lot. I think the first thing I would do is do a deep analysis of the folks who've been working within the system for years, and see if just do an assessment on staffing, like not necessarily staffing within facilities, but staffing within the department, because you have a lot of folks who worked in some spaces for a really long time, and we have to make sure that those people know and understand the current climate that we're in and are willing to work and do the changes. So that's the first thing that I would do. And then the other thing is I would make sure that our communities have that funding. You know, the goal is not to have kids within in DJJ.
Right.
Is we need to get that money to community, because I don't want to have the kids. You know, my goal would be changing the vision of saying we want to shut this shit down. We don't want to have a Department of Juvenile Justice. What are we going to do to make sure that we're creating a system that is looking at prevention and intervention before we even get kids in our building?
Right. You are a role model to a lot of different people. Role model to young boys and girls. You're also the first openly LGBTQ member of the state house, the House of Representatives. What do you feel a sense of obligation or responsibility based upon who you are to people, or do you even think about that? I
don't think about it. You know, I know that being elected, being the first anything, just being a leader in general, there's a lot of responsibility that comes with that, you know. And, you know, I was there when my sister had both of her kids, and was there when my brother's wife had, you know, their kids. And so I've always had a strong sense of responsibility that I've got young people looking at me. And so for me, it's just a matter of continuing that. But you know, being elected, you are under a bigger microscope. But
I've heard that.
Yeah. but you know, like as far as responsibility, like this is my life, you know, and this responsibility of being a leader, a mentor, someone that kids and people are looking up to. My family, the kids of my family have always looked up to me. The people in my community back in Richmond have always looked up to me. And so it's just greater now. But I don't think about that part. I think if I thought about that part, I would probably get overwhelmed.
I understand what it's like to be a public official. I understand what it's like to walk down the street and people come up to you that don't even know you to tell you what you need to be doing.
Yeah.
If you could reverse it and tell the community what you feel the community needs to do to become better, what would you tell the community?
I mean, I think that about a few months ago, Councilman Keturah Arthur, I think he wrote a tweet or said something on Facebook, and he talked about how constituents need to be contacting constituents. Constituents need to be contacting their elected officials. Elected officials need to be in conversation with constituents, and vice versa. Everybody needs to be in community. And what I would say is that we have so many issues that are plaguing our community. And I know that people have, their time is low, their money's low, we're tired. But I would just challenge people to find one issue to get behind. Whether it's education, whether it's healthcare, whether it's making sure that the trash and the alleys are cleaned up. Like, pick one thing. And I think that if folks were able to pick one thing and just spend a few hours a week on that one thing, if everyone did that, I think that we will see a change in our community. And so I would just ask people to find what that passion is of theirs, and get engaged and involved. And I would also tell them to start going to public meetings, whether you can't go to it on that day, but go back and watch those meetings, learn and understand what's happening in local government and state government, so you can be informed. And then it's also your responsibility to inform your family and your neighbors about it.
I know that you are where you're supposed to be. I know you've talked about the training that you've had without knowing that you've actually trained for where you are today. Where do you want to be tomorrow? Or can you tell that right now?
Well, tomorrow I'll be in Frankfurt. I'm giving a
you know what I'm talking about.
To the NAACP, so I'll be doing that tomorrow evening. But honestly, I'm not sure. And I have been challenged by my therapist and a couple of mentors to start writing that out. But honestly, I've always lived my life, and like today is the moment, and God is going to lead me to the next space. And literally, when I look at the different transitions I've had in my life, like I know when it's time to shift and change. And typically, once I start preparing myself for that shift, something would come up. Like with ACLU, I knew at the end of 2021 that I was going to resign from that position. I didn't know what I was going to do. My mom was like, "What you mean you going to resign?" Everybody's like, "What you going to do?" And I was like, "I don't know, but I know that my time doing this is up, and it's time for me to do something else." Unbeknownst to me, it was running for office. And so I've always felt like that, God lets me know when it's time to move. I never know what it is. So I'm not really sure what's next.
Let me ask you, is there anything like, sometimes I'll ask the question, if you could tell your 10-year-old self something,
Wow.
What would you tell your 10-year-old self about life and how you would go about things move a little bit differently?
I think I would tell my 10-year-old self to read more. I did not like reading growing up. And then I also would tell my 10-year-old self to try new things. There was a growing up, sometimes I didn't want to try new things. I was embarrassed. Am I going to do it right? Are people going to laugh at me? But now there's something that I embrace, is that if you aren't trying new things, then you're not going to learn and grow. And so I don't think that I really got a hold to that and really understood that piece into my 20s. And so I think that, my 10-year-old self, I would tell her to not be afraid and to try all the things, and to definitely read more.
A couple more questions.
Mm-hmm.
Where are we today as Black folk, as people of color in Kentucky? Are we in a good spot? And if not, what do you think that we can do differently?
I mean, that's a hard question. I mean, I think that we can look at folks as individuals and be very proud.
Because we're only a few years removed from Breonna Taylor.
Yeah.
So things didn't just change overnight.
Yeah, we're not, and we're really not a few years removed from the civil rights.
Right.
That was only 60 years ago. Mm-hmm. And so, one of the things that I often tell people all the time is that we're not removed from not being able to be in spaces, or to not being able to have this job, or, and so I think when you look at it on the scale is that, I think that, there's pockets of us we have privilege and we've done great things. But I think if you look at us as a collective, I think that we've been quiet way too long. It wasn't until 2020 that a lot that you heard loudly, why isn't the West End getting the things that they need? Why isn't the West End getting this or that? I think people were talking about it. I don't want to say that people weren't talking about it, but in a way of like, we got some momentum, and how are we going to put pressure to make people move and change? But I feel like that we kind of gotten back into a place where we kind of getting quiet again. Mm-hmm. And that's scary for me. I think that we've got a lot to do to continue to hold folks like myself, who is elected, accountable. I still have to remember, like, although I'm community, I'm still elected. Mm-hmm. And so I also have to be held accountable. I think that we have a lot of work to do. I think that, we are at a time with, having a new mayoral administration. We just named a chief here in the city. We have an opportunity really to come together as a collective and continue to push and make the change that we want to see. It's not going to happen overnight, and we're going to have to do it collectively. And we also have to know and understand. And I think that this is sometimes where we as Black folks miss it is that we don't really talk about class a lot here. And so there's also a class issue, not only amongst the Louisville community in general, but also in the Black community. And I think that, we have to come together as a collective and say what it is that we need, but we also have to address some of those issues within our own.
You said the word need.
Yeah.
What do you need? Last question. You've done a lot for the community, and you will continue to do for the community. What do you need for your support?
Wow, thank you. That's a good question. I think one of the big things that I need right now is continued prayers and support. I will be running for re-election again, so I will be opening up some donation links for folks to support my campaign for re-election. I'll probably wait till after November to do that, and so I will need support on that. And then I just need people to when they see me out to let me know that they see me. I think that that's important. This is very rough and tough work. And also I will let people know I will be launching some consulting work. We do not get paid a lot of money as an elected official. And so I was telling somebody the other day, like, I'm more broke now than I was last year. And so I will be opening up to some consulting work. And so I will be reaching out to some folks to say, hey, if there's a way that I can do some business with you, let me know.
Last thing, how do people reach you?
You can send me an email. My official email is keturah.herron@lrc.ky.gov. I'm also on Twitter, my first name, Keturah.Herron. And a lot of people have my phone number. And so if you know somebody who's got it, you can get it. But a lot of folks have my personal cell phone number. I'm not going to give it out on this platform because I'm not sure. Right. But a lot of folks have my cell phone number, and I can be reached on that. And but I'm open. If you see me out, please stop and talk. I might say this may not be appropriate, set up a meeting time, but I'm open. I'm open and honest, and I'm ready to continue to do good work, and I'm ready to do some work with some folks.
Well, I would say this in closing. I had an opportunity to speak to a few people in Frankfurt because I let them know that you were coming on the show. Not one person had anything negative to say, and everyone was very positive. One person in particular was extremely astonished and impressed that you are able to do as much as you're doing right now in the position you're in. You're pretty young, pretty new to the House, but to be able to be in some of the meetings or have a place at the table, as they said, is very impressive. And it's a test of who you are and what you bring to the table as well.
Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate
welcome.
It. Yeah, thank y'all for having me on the show.
You're welcome. I wish that we had more time, but unfortunately we do not.
Yeah.
I'd like to close by saying thank you for being here today. And as we like to close the show all the time, it doesn't matter what you think, doesn't matter what I say. At the end of the day, it's all a matter of perspective. Thank you a lot for coming.
Yep, thank you.